the committee's asked me to keep this introduction to 2 minutes. And what I want to ask the committee is, what were you thinking? I mean, for Pete's sakes, this is Dave McGillivray. You can't read the headings in his resume in 2 minutes. But I'm going to try to hit the high points. I met Dave in 1981. At that time, by 1981, he had run 3,500 miles across the United States for charity. He had run 1,500 miles up the East Coast from Florida to New England for the Jimmy Fund for charity. He had triathloned around New England 1,500 miles for charity. He'd finished the 3rd Ironman in 14th place. This is before 1981 when I met him. In the next 30 years, Dave has run 125 marathons, including 38 Bostons. He's finished 8 Ironmen. He's raised millions of dollars for his charities, and he's continued his annual habit of, since he was 12 years old, on his birthday, of running his age in miles, and he's no longer 12. But wait! He's not being inducted into the Hall of Fame as an athlete. He's an event director.
How it all started for me, when I was a kid, there's only one thing I wanted to be and one thing only, and that was I wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to be an athlete, but unfortunately for me, I was handicapped, if you will. And my handicap was that I was vertically challenged. And so, as a result, I wouldn't be able to, you know, my friends bucked up for sides. You know, I got Pete, I got Fred, I got Vern, I got Sally, I got Jane. I'm picking the girls over me. And I was always the last one cut when I went out for high school sports, all the time, always the last one cut. And when I went out for the high school basketball team, I got cut. And the basketball coach comes up to me, puts his arm around me, and he sort of looks down at me. Everybody looked down at me, and he said, "Dave, if you were 5 inches taller, you'd be my starting guard." I said, "Excuse me, coach?" He said, "If you were 5 inches taller, you'd be my starting guard." I said, I'm sorry, I thought it had to do with ability level, not how tall you were. So I challenged the center, who was 6'5", and I was 5'4.87" on a good day. And I challenged him one-on-one at 21, and I beat him. I beat him, and I threw the ball off the court, and I walked away. And I said, I will never, ever, ever allow anybody to tell me I'm not good enough, that I don't belong. I don't belong in this whole team sport thing. So I went home that night, and I put a sign over my bed. And the sign said, "Please, God, make me grow." Well, he must have been on vacation or answering someone else's prayer and whatever, because he certainly didn't answer mine. Or did he? And in retrospect, I look back upon my life and I said, he did answer my prayer, because he did make me grow. He made me grow morally and ethically and spiritually. He made me grow internally. Internally, because that's what it's all about. It's what's in here. Not the physical person, but what's inside of the person. So what did I do? I started to run, because nobody can catch you from running, right? You just run. So that's all I did. I ran, and I've run about 140,000 miles since. I facetiously tell people, I used to be 6'5". This is what happened. So as Jim said, when I was 12 years old, I decided I didn't want cake and ice cream. I was going to just go for a run, so I ran 12 miles. I turned 13 miles, 14 miles, and I just have kept it going. And last year, I turned 56 and ran 56 miles on my 56th birthday. And people say to me, that's okay, no. People say to me, hey, that's pretty cool. What are you going to do when you turn 80? I said, well, first of all, I want to be breathing, you know. Then get out of bed, and then I'll decide what I want to do. But really, I say to people, well, it's my game, so it's my rules. It's my game, so it's my rules. And that's what everybody should live by, because that's life. It's our game, it's our rules. You shouldn't worry about what other people think you should do. You should decide for yourself what's important and what isn't. So then I decided, when I turned 17 years old, I called my grandfather up and I said, Grandpa, I want to run that race in Boston. He says, oh, they call that the Boston Marathon. I said, well, that's a coincidence. So he says, okay. He says, okay, I'll wait for you at Coolidge Corner. I said, where's that? He says, 24 miles. I said, okay, great. My brother drove me out to the start. I took off. I got to the hills in Newton. Down I went, flat out. I got taken to the Newton Wellesley Hospital in an ambulance. And I called my parents. I said, please pick me up. They said, where are you? I said, I'm in the hospital. I said, what are you doing there? I said, never mind, just come pick me up. So they came, they picked me up. I got home. I called my grandfather. No answer. Called him again. No answer. 9 o'clock at night, he answers the phone. I said, Grandpa, where have you been? He says, Dave, where have you been? I've been waiting all this time for you. The old man ran by, the street sweepers went by, no Dave. I said, well, I apologize, I failed. He said, you what? I said, I failed. He said, nah, you didn't fail. I said, what'd I do? He said, you learned. I said, cool. What'd I learn? He said, you learned that you cannot go along in life and set reckless goals. You had no business being in that race. I was banded, by the way. Don't tell anyone. So I had no business being in that race. I didn't train. I didn't earn the right. He says, I'll cut another deal with you. I said, what's that? He said, you train next year. I'll be there for you. I said, cool. Okay, great. My grandfather passed away 2 months after that. And I dedicated the whole year to train and train and train and run in that marathon in his memory. And I did. I was running 120, 130, 140 miles a week. The day before the Boston Marathon, 1973, I got a stomach virus and I was sick as a dog, and my parents said, you can't run. I said, what do you mean I can't run? They said, you can't. And I said, can you give me something that no one else in my life has ever given me? They said, what? I said, a chance. Can you just let me toe the line and see what happens? I said, I don't know what's going to happen. I feel crummy today, but tomorrow I might feel better. Let me run. They said, okay, fine. Gun fires, off I go. I got to 5 miles. I went, oh, they were right. This stinks. It was awful. I get to the halfway point. I saw my mother and father. There's my mother crying. You know, you put your parents through more of this. Dave Scott has put his parents through more pain and aggravation than he'll ever experience out in Kona. The heck with that. Poor Dottie and Vern, worrying about him. That's what they do. And there's my dad taking pictures. So I was vindicated. He's taking pictures of my mother crying. Cry over here, anyway. So I kept on going, and I get to the point where I dropped out the year before and did the Survivor's Shuffle over Heartbreak Hill, and I got to a point with 21.2 miles. Down I went again. I was dead. I was gone, scraping the bottom of the barrel. I couldn't go another step. I couldn't go another step. Honestly, nothing. Down I went, put my head between my legs. I looked around and I said, I can't believe, Grandpa, I apologize, I failed again. And I looked around and I said, wow. In our lives, always, there are defining moments. And when the basketball coach cut me, it was a defining moment. Right then and there in my life was a defining moment. I looked around, I said, this place looks familiar. I looked behind me. It was the cemetery where they buried my grandfather on the Boston Marathon course. And he said he'd be there. He was, spiritually, because it's not all about physical, right? He was there spiritually. So I picked myself up and I kept on going. I finished in 4.5 hours, the Boston Marathon. I said, I'm going to run this race every year for the rest of my life. And I have. And I've trained and I've trained and I've run 125 marathons, and I only didn't finish one, the first one, because I didn't earn the right to be there. And that's what our sport is literally all about. So then I read about a friend of mine who had biked across America, and I said, well, if he can bike across America, I can run across America. What an idiot. You know, why would I think, biking is a little bit easier than running, right? Right. So I said, well, I'm just going to do this anyways. So I ran from Medford to Medford, 3,452 miles, and averaging about 45, 50 miles a day. But I mean, again, there were no books out there, how to run across America in 10 easy steps. So I didn't have a Dave Scott teaching me how to run across America. I could tell you all kinds of crazy stories. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'll move on, right? So I had 80 goals. It took me 80 days, 80 goals. I was patient, one day at a time. People say, how'd you run 3,452 miles? I didn't do it all at once, nonstop. I cut it up into pieces that I can handle. Same thing with training, same thing with Ironman, same thing with running marathons. That's how you do it. It's a lot of it's up there. So then I often get asked by kids, especially when I speak at schools, they say, what's your greatest accomplishment? You've done all these crazy things. What's your greatest one? I said, that's a good question. My greatest accomplishment is my next one. No, it is. It's my next one. I mean, the past is the past. A lot of people say, well, when I was 23, I did this. I don't care. You know, what are you doing for me today? What about tomorrow? What do you got planned? So it's always thinking about the future. So that's what I would try to do. And my first Ironman experience, real quick, I read about it in Sports Illustrated. The problem was, you know, it was just after I had run across the country. So I thought I was, you know, I was the Dave Scott of back then, and I was Superman. I could do anything, right? The problem was I didn't know how to swim, and I didn't own a bike. So, you know, just like my grandfather said, you got to earn the right and all that kind of stuff, and you can't set reckless goals. So eventually I trained for it, and I was able to get over there and do it. But the problem was is that Dave had a secret weapon. Vern and Dottie were following him in a car. Right? That's why he won the Ironman. Don't let anyone kid you, right? Because of his parents, right? I had nobody. I went over there by myself, and they said, well, where's your support crew? I said, I don't have one. He says, hey, okay, here's the phone book. Call somebody. So I did. I had to call people, and I found a Navy guy who would follow me. He didn't even know the course. He didn't know he got me lost, you know? I went over there with a friend from Boston. His name was Hal, and he epitomizes the Ironman. He can bench press 500 pounds. He's run 100 marathons. He eats everything in sight. And I'd lost my support crew, so I pulled over, and I'm waiting and waiting for someone to help me out, and there goes Hal right by me. Like, didn't even, he's waving to me. I said, wait, aren't you my friend? We come over here together. He just keeps on going by, and he's eating everything in sight. He was eating Twinkies and Fiddle Faddle and Fig Newtons and chocolate bars, and, you know, what they used to do is they weighed us in before we get into the water. They weighed us in on the water, I mean, right before the swim, then they weighed us in when we get off the bike, and they weighed us in on the run twice, because they said if we lost more than 10% of our body weight, we were yanked from the race. Hal get on the scale, he gained weight in the competition. This guy went 140 miles and gained 5 pounds. It's kind of crazy, right? So anyway, so foolishly I went back and did 7 more times and whatever. And then I ran up the East Coast of America with wheelchair pioneer Bob Hall. Imagine a physically challenged person pushing a wheelchair 1,522 miles up the entire eastern seaboard, and I was running next to him the entire way. It was unbelievable. All kinds of, I ran the Boston Marathon once to raise money for the blind. I ran blindfolded. I ran blindfolded because I wanted to know what it was like to be blind, if at least visually impaired. I ran 3 hours, 14 minutes, blindfolded, and I had 2 guides with me, and I would have run much faster, but the guides couldn't run any faster. It's like a hose. I've learned that we should always live our dreams, and that people who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those who are doing it. Right? I always think we should set goals, not limits, and I truly believe that the worst injustice anyone could ever do to themselves is to underestimate their own ability. That's the worst injustice you can do, is to underestimate your own ability. It's not only injustice to you, it's an injustice to those people who need your help, So that's very important. So I've learned that there are no such thing as individual achievements. That's why getting these awards, it's not an individual achievement. It's everyone else in this room and all the friends back home that helped us get across the line and earn this thing. A lot of people cross the finish line of the Boston Marathon. I go up to them and say, hey, how'd you do? How'd you do? He goes, well, I could have run a little bit faster. My hip, my knee, I shouldn't stop for the burger and the beer and, you know, this kind of stuff, right? I said, wait a minute, you just finished the marathon. Why can't you pat yourself on the back, give yourself some credit? You know, every one of us in this room, we have one thing and one thing in common. Every one of us, know what it is? We woke up this morning. Yeah, we woke up this morning. Everything else, you know, everything else is a bonus after that. And that people just, so, and I also learned that no matter where in this country my car breaks down, I'll be able to run home. You know, sorry about that. Last story and I'm done. So I get a phone call from this woman from Children's Hospital in Boston. Her name's Katie. She says, Dave, my name's Katie, can I come and see you? She came into the Boston Marathon office. She went by my office front door. And I said, in a wheelchair. I said, oh, this woman's in a wheelchair. She goes into the conference room. I walk in the conference room. I see her back. I walk in. I see her face. My jaw dropped. Katie Lynch, was 26 inches tall. I went, oh. I said, what's up? She said, can I ask you a question? I said, what's that? She says, can I run the Boston Marathon? And I said, ask me a difficult question. She said, really? I said, yeah, you can run the marathon. She says, well, I have a caveat. I said, what's that? She says, my marathon is 26.2 feet. And I said, that's okay. So she trained like the Dickens, like the rest of us, in her wheelchair, in her walker. 1,200 members of the media, the most emotional moment ever in the history of the Boston Marathon that I have ever seen. She got out of her wheelchair, she got on her walker. I yelled, go. She walked it in about 7.5 minutes. 7.5 minutes. I gave her a hug. I put a laurel wreath on her head. I put a medal around her neck. We gave each other another hug. Then all of a sudden, around 9 hours later, I'm doing my marathon run at night. And I'm running down the finish line of Boylston Street, and I see, in a distance, I see this person in a wheelchair. I said, who the heck is waiting for me at the finish line? It was Katie. It was Katie. She was waiting for me. And she put a laurel wreath on my head that she made me, and she put a medal around my neck that she made me. And she looked up at me, she says, ha, I beat ya. So Katie has since passed on, but her memory will obviously last forever. So I accept this on behalf of all my colleagues at DMSC, especially my good friend Rich Havens, and the BAA, and on behalf of all my fellow race directors. So to all race directors out there, just remember, our job's secure because nobody else wants it. Thank you very much.